You're tuned in to the Dr. Kinney Show, and I'm your host, Dr. Erin Kinney, a naturopathic doctor and speaker dedicated to unraveling the mysteries of your body and guiding you back into balance. Let's get started. Hey, real quick, guys, before we start the episode, I want to share something that I'm really excited about. I know how hard it can be when your hormones feel out of balance, low energy, mood swings, and not feeling like yourself, which is why I created the supplement line Optimal Harmony. With natural science-backed ingredients, it's designed to support your hormones, stabilize your mood, and help you reclaim your energy and confidence, because when your hormones are balanced, everything feels easier. You deserve to feel amazing every day, so let Optimal Harmony line of supplements help you get there. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Dr. Kinney Show. This week I'm really pleased to have joining me Jennifer Barnhill, who is a friend and a colleague and fellow author, and she's here today to talk about her book called The Military Stories We've Been Told and the Ones You Need to Hear. She is also Navy Spouse of the Year, and we're gonna have a really cool conversation about resiliency and about her book. So Jen, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. So can you start by telling listeners your story, like why you wrote this book and just kind of your story in general?
No, I'm a writer, not an editor necessarily, so I'll try to be as quick as I can. So actually, it's very poetic, actually. I met my husband, who is active duty military, while I was working at the Smithsonian, actually. I was working at the American Art Museum, living in Northern Virginia, while he was a student here at the Naval Academy in this local area. I had a scholarship to get my PhD in art history lined up. So I'm a white glove researcher kind of nerd.
Yeah.
And I studied journalism as well in undergrad. But, as is the case, sometimes when the person crosses your path and that derails your best laid plans, that good things can happen. So joined this crazy military life, moved around. I was able to work as a journalist here and there a lot over the years. But what brought me to this book and this conversation was actually one story, one friend. I had a friend, a military spouse, who had a devastating cancer diagnosis. And it really was shocking to me. We were living in San Diego, and it's a high cost of living area. Everyone has jobs. Everyone's busy and running around. And there was this assumption that our spouse club, our group of all volunteers, would step up and fill in the gaps for her. And we did as best we could, but it kind of put this question in the back of my mind of, is this structure that's based on volunteerism really the catch-all for military family support? If someone comes to a new community, they don't have a family there, how are they getting help? How are they getting the meals provided for them and the childcare gaps filled? And so I started researching and kind of went back to my roots of journalism and dug into the problem. And it kind of uncovered for me a lot of these hidden stories that I hadn't, even being in the community, didn't know about. So that's what brought me to this book and a little bit about me, but I'm a data nerd and a researcher. Yeah. And so that's just me in a nutshell, nerd.
Well, and I think it's really interesting. I read some of the book and the chapter that we're going to talk about, the chapter on resilience and kind of how the military looks at that. And, I do so much work with the nervous system and kind of the concept of resilience. But I think, I really loved in your chapter, looking at how so many people are forced to fake it. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because I think what you talk about in the book is it's almost like this little, what's the word I'm looking for? Thing that we're looking at in the military that can be extrapolated into the bigger problems in society, right? Yeah. And this term resilience, and it's this, let's bounce back quickly. And our nervous systems are designed to be stressed and then to bounce back quickly. But the problem arises when you're stuck in chronic stress. And if and I've worked with a lot of military families, you're in chronic stress, and especially on the spouse side, because you guys aren't trained with that, right? And you're having to move and take care of the kids and do all the things on your own mostly, right? When your spouse is deployed, and that's not acute stress, that is chronic stress. Yeah. And to be expected to be we'll just bounce back and I'll look perfect and do all the things, it's not feasible for anybody.
Yeah. You got it right, exactly. And it's this idea of bouncing back and coming back to your original shape is the term that we use to kind of talk about resilience. Yeah. But I like to say that, the term is meant to describe metals and materials bouncing back. But when you bend a spring and you do that multiple times, eventually that metal will wear down and it will break. And, so that is something that I remind people when we overuse the term resilience, which is where this came from. And I'll kind of illustrate it in a story. a military spouse. As a military journalist, I report about all kinds of things. And I encountered this one military spouse who had 2 children with a cancer diagnosis, both of them unrelated. I mean, well, they should say unrelated cancer diagnoses. They're still getting care and treatment for that. She is very put together. She did not strike me as a reporter as someone who is, just pulled on all sides or breaking down. And her story was striking because she went in to get care, to get some case management through the military system. And when she met with this case manager, she was told that she was not eligible for case management. And over the years, she got comfortable with a lot of these employees, and she asked, hey, if I came in here with my hair crazy, with, stains on my sweats and looking disheveled, would you have actually offered me services? And she said, yeah, honestly, we would have. And so in the military, resilience is not what we know it is in like a clinical setting. It kind of has become something different. It is more of a gold star to be awarded. And, Caitlin, who I write about in the book, she had that gold star and she showed her outward facing resilience, but inside she, still needed help. And so this idea of faking it till you make it, when it comes to mental health, means that inwardly there is still work to be done, and it can actually be what was a really great idea of getting you through that battlefield situation, life and death, like you were talking about. It's an essential skill, life-saving skill, but it actually has kind of been weaponized over the years. And so I write about it in the book because I think it's important for us to understand what happens when this idea is misunderstood or even misused.
Yeah. Well, and it's just so interesting. I think what my takeaway from reading the chapter was like, when you kind of have this fake it to make it and you get a gold star for bouncing back, it's like, of course you're going to want to do that. But then it kind of takes away this idea of being vulnerable and asking for help. And what I think is oftentimes so beautiful about the military community is like, you guys do support each other so much. And if people would ask for help, everyone would jump, you know what I mean? But it's like, it's almost like this whole thing has been skewed where people are like, no, I'm fine, I don't need help.
Yeah.
But they have this community that could help them, right? The community.
Yeah.
I know maybe not the military itself, right?
Yeah, so I mean, there is support systems in the military, and it's kind of a very interesting dynamic where there are mental health resources. Even the history of how the resilience programming kind of came about started from a really good place. The military wanted to offer support for people who they know and acknowledge how much we go through. So they wanted to train the service members primarily, but also families, in how to be more resilient. The problem with that is that it's not an easy measure. Okay, so I bounce back. Well, how soon am I supposed to bounce back? So people are inside, they're like, I'm not really resilient because I don't feel resilient. I see everyone around me putting on that shiny, happy face, but I don't feel that. And so they think that there's something wrong with them almost. It's almost like a gaslighting where...
they're gaslighting themselves almost, right? Like,
exactly.
You should be okay. You should be resilient. They've told you you're resilient. Like, why don't you feel better?
Yes. And structurally within the military, because they do offer it, they wanted to help people, but part of the programming, as I was mentioning before, was intentionally moved from like a clinical setting into the culture. So it was a train the trainer kind of model where other military service members and family members who were not professionals in mental health were given the training to train others in how to be resilient. And that is, to destigmatize getting help. So it came from, like I said, a good place, but what ended up happening is it left that clinical professional context and became cultural.
Yeah.
And, what you might experience, or what people might be familiar with is, if you go through, let's say, a miscarriage, that's very common. But hearing a message of, oh, that happened to me. Oh, it'll get better soon. Rushing people through their feelings and their emotions does harm. And it is something we all kind of can experience a little bit, but in the military community, it's almost like a conditioning of, minimizing like your feelings and your emotions.
Yeah. And then, a lot of my work, I treat so many women with autoimmune diseases and really chronic health issues. And so much of that arises when you stuff emotions in, when you don't work through whatever you're supposed to be processing. So, I think in a larger sense, what we're talking about here in the military, it happens a lot in everyday culture, right? I think I see so many people that are like, oh yeah, I had a patient the other day that her spouse had passed away, her grandfather, she'd had so much loss, and she was like, well, I just had to push through. I don't have time for that. And it was like, I could see her being like, well, I have to go on. I have to be resilient. She wasn't using the term resilience, but that was what she was kind of, well, that's what our culture does. We just kind of move on. But she was so sick. Her body was really failing her because her body was screaming at her like, hey, you need to take the time to process this. You can be resilient or you can get through this, but it's going to take a little bit longer and you need to ask for help, right? And I think that's the biggest thing. It's almost like the military is like almost telling people, you don't need to ask for help. Like you are resilient. We've trained you to be resilient. Don't reach out. Don't be vulnerable. And then it takes away. And I think that is, again, I think I see that in our society so much, particularly for women, that we are taught to push through and not to ask for help, and we can be strong and we can do it. I think I've had a bunch of guests on the show talking about the postpartum time, or this is a common thing in postpartum. Like, oh, you got to bounce back. How are we going to bounce back quickly? 6 weeks after baby, like you're ready to go back to work and back to exercise and back to sex. And women are like, really? Am I? I'm not quite ready for that yet. You've had 3 kids.
Yes, it's crazy. Right? Yeah. Well, I think also, I think when we think of it, especially as women, we have a certain feeling. We want to take care of everything else around us before we take care of ourselves. Yes. But I'm going to flip the script a little bit and give a different scenario, and that might make people change their mind about this. So it's local scenario. So this area, there's always talk of redistricting in the schools, right? Yes. Something that I know we have experienced. One of the scenarios that was presented was having a small group of students in the local area go from one elementary school to a different feeder middle school, where they make their friends for middle school, and then they leave those new friends and take only 40 kids to a different feeder in the area.
To a different high school.
Yes. Because of the fact that the numbers at some of these other middle schools weren't being met, and, redistricting happens. No one's saying that that's not okay. We need to do those things. However, that solution relies upon the resiliency of our children. Yeah. We know the stress that they're under when they go to high school, the pressures to perform, and we are relying on them to rise to the occasion as a plan as adults. Yeah. And often resiliency looks to do that. It replaces the need to fix underlying problems because it relies upon the person to rise to the occasion. So it's not necessarily done with malicious intent. I don't think that relying upon the resiliency of children is bad. They are resilient in the right ways. Yeah. But also when we structurally rely on the military to be resilient, we don't have to fix the problems. Yeah. So for Caitlin's story, they didn't have enough care providers to go around. Yeah. So instead, they're relying on people to rise to the occasion instead of fixing what is an underlying problem. Providing her the care that
she actually needed. Yes, she looked fine, but she really wasn't fine inside.
100%.
How could you be fine inside when you have 2 kids with cancer?
Yeah. So resiliency can be a life-saving skill. Yes. But it also can be used to mask underlying structural problems. Yeah.
And that I think is a perfect way to describe all of this, is and I think we do that in a society as a whole, being like, no, I'm fine. When a lot of the women that I work with, what they need is support. They need a community that supports them. They need to be reaching out, but they've kind of been trained not to do that. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. I think that we do self-police ourselves within the military community. I gave that example of, the miscarriage of someone, being kind of rushed through their emotions. I think sometimes we do that because we're uncomfortable with our own emotions.
100%.
And we know, and especially in the military, if one of us starts to break down, it's catching. Yeah. And it is hard to live this life. It's hard to not know if your service member's alive, if they're safe. It is a challenging lifestyle. So it is something that it's a self-preservation.
Absolutely.
In the self-policing side of things, I think I would hope that our extreme example could teach how to better apply some of these ideas. So I like the term grit a little bit more with Angela Duckworth. She talks about that because she's measuring things in her work that are objective. They're not subjective. So bouncing back, well, how long does it take to bounce back to be really resilient? She looks at external factors like test scores and lifestyle factors that are not self-reported. So I know I told you I was a nerd. I'm going to like push up my glasses that I'm not wearing. But she's looking at it from this external perspective that really allows you to say, that person rose to the occasion, but they're going through the problem. They're not going back to how they started off. And so therefore it kind of removes that feeling of like, I should be able to be like I was before I did this hard thing.
Because you're not going to be that ever again. And that's, I think, the terminology bounce back to what you were before is really a poor terminology, right? It should be like what you're saying, like, should move forward to a new version of you who has worked through something hard, who has gone through moves, taken care of kids, like done all the things that you've had to do, worried about it's about like whatever it is. But maybe it's like that terminology that needs to go away is this bounce back kind of thing.
I mean, the book proposes like new ways to go forward. Because it's never just about the problem. Like it's always about finding solutions to real problems. And so how do we talk about hard things? How do we acknowledge the hardship? Because I think sometimes when we are asked to do hard things by an institution, especially our military, there is a temptation to minimize that hard thing because they want more people to sign up and join. But I think a denial of the hardship is not quite, people have access to the military lifestyle in ways they never did before with social media. They, in our local community here, you have some access to it. But also I will say the local area here in Annapolis is the shiny example of the military.
It's very true.
It is not necessarily
the perfect Brazilian military families.
You're not seeing like, you see the parents saying goodbye, to their children, sending their kids to school. But that's a different experience than, saying goodbye to mom or dad, when you're saying goodbye or you're welcoming them home, and it's the extremes of the military experience when you're in a different environment. And I think that the book kind of tries to highlight the in between, like the real life. It's not just the welcome home signs and folded flags. There's a lot more to this community that is nuanced and different than what people might see on the surface. And I think that that's the goal of the book, is to kind of not undermine, but to amplify, like, this is part of the story. We are resilient. We are
You are extremely resilient
in the truest sense. But what does that look like? And what happens when we feel we don't rise to the occasion? How can we in our community inform better terms, better research that is more reflective of what it means to rise to the occasion on repeat,
I would think, doesn't it think like it starts by hearing stories that like have been kind of pushed underground or that aren't right? Like bringing stories to light is always like the first step in healing anything. It's like, wait, we got to know like what's actually happening.
Well, I mean, your work talking about cortisol and like the misconceptions and all of those things, there's always more to the story, right? There's the good and the bad. There's the part that everyone wants to talk about, but if you don't talk about the other part, it's not a complete picture of what the experience is. But I think it's that complexity of military experience that, I mean, we're still in it, we chose to stay, and there's good. There's coming alongside each other, being there for each other. We help each other through. We are together resilient. But it's not on one person to hold that themselves.
Well, I think that's a really cool concept to think about. Like, I think, community is so important for all of us. And I think, I don't know, it's been interesting, like watching, like I'm loving like that. I feel like in-person community things are really coming back since the pandemic. And, I think so many of us are having to kind of be resilient after 3 or 4 years of really intense stress. You guys had it like the pandemic plus your regular military stress, right? So it's like, I think everyone was dealing with what did this mean? All the shutdowns and everything. What did that mean? Plus your regular everyday life stress. And I think everyone now is like, all right, well, I'm back and we're back and everything's normal. But are things really normal? Have we really addressed like all that stuff that went on? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know.
I think it's there. I think we'll be discovering.
It'll be interesting to see over the next 10 years, like what kind of studies and what things will come out. Like I think about our kids, we have kids that were really young during like my youngest, Hannah, was she was in pre-K. She didn't go to school for 2 years, right? Like, she was watching YouTube in my office, learning God knows what. But I mean, she's doing fine, but I sometimes worry about, like, what was the implications for that? And, you know, we talked earlier about kids being resilient. Yes, they're resilient, but do we want our kids to have to be resilient? You know, I think that's like a bigger question. Like,
well, for COVID in particular, I think that the difference and the distinction is, like, resilience is typically measured in acute moments. That is the difference. And that's what the book kind of goes into, is the military did not study resilience over time. I do think with kids in COVID that they're not being repeatedly asked to not have their friends. That was their normal for a time, right? So I think that what I would say, and this is based on my observation, I am not, you know, a clinical professional in this field. It was just as a researcher, this is what I found. But it's the repeated asking to be, like, to rise to that occasion that can turn negative. Or, you know, the cure can become the toxin.
Oh, absolutely.
And for our kids in COVID, of course there's going to be a cost, but I don't think that they're being asked to, like, do the same thing on repeat. They're able to, the reintegration might be quite different than what it was before, but it's not that bounce back idea or the expectation. I think that if it was, that's why, you know, the locations that didn't pull them in and out, I'm not saying that they're better off or worse off, but I think that adds to the complexity of how they've had to rise to the occasion or not. So fingers crossed. I mean, we're still dealing with it, right?
Kids are going to be okay.
I mean, they are. And resilience is a true life-saving essential skill, and we all have it. So this, you know, this book does not seek to undermine that. It just shares the fact that, you know, there's an example in the book that talks about germ theory. And again, I'm such a nerd.
So, I love it.
Okay. So it talks about how in the discovery of germ theory, and there was an obstetrician clinic where the mothers were giving birth, and they were being treated by medical professionals in one hand and midwives in another. And in the case of the midwives, they weren't associating themselves with the morgue, whereas the medical professionals were going into the morgue, not washing their hands, and then infecting the moms. And so the cure, which is the medical professional, was actually part of the toxic, result. And so it's the medical professional has this amazing skill that they were helping the moms, but without that knowledge of how it has turned toxic, they're unknowingly, until it was proven otherwise. But in that story, they actually start to know that hand washing is essential. They became aware of a better way. And yet they kind of were hesitant to accept this new way of washing your hands. And it took a while time for them to pick up on that. And so I think, in the book, I kind of allude to this idea is, we have this cure, we have this professional idea, this important idea, but we need to understand and research like how it has contributed to doing harm as well. And so I don't know how I got to this particular part, but I love that story. And it's anything. It's how can good turn from where you started.
From what you're just talking about, it's interesting. I'm thinking so many like parallels to my book and think about exercise. Like exercise is technically stress. It is a good stress. And if your nervous system is in a good place and you go for a run, you get this high and you feel great and then you calm back down. So that we could use that term resilience. Like you turn your nervous system on and then you stretch and you calm that down and then you're fine. Now, if you were to go, and I've done this before, you run multiple miles every day and you don't give your body a break because after you go for a run, you go right to work and you're turned on all the time. You're not actually being resilient. You're just staying in this fight-flight state all the time. So you're not coming out of it. And that's what leads to burnout. And then you get all kinds of other problems. So again, you mentioned briefly, like resiliency is like the acute stress and then you come back. But again, we were not designed to stay in that acute stress state for a prolonged period of time without any downtime. Because really, in order to be resilient, you have to have enough downtime to recoup so your body can do the stressful thing again. And that's where the problem is that, especially like someone like, a military family, you're under stress constantly, right?
Yeah. I mean, the statistic that I have in the back of my mind is after the first year of service members getting out of service, suicide rates are way higher for the year following getting out of service. And there's many factors. Like I would not even begin to suggest that resilience is the
I would think that it would be a big part of it. From what I know, like on the like physiology side, usually when you're in that fight flight mode, your body is go, pumping out all these resources that keep your brain feeling up. And then when you come out of that and you're so burnt out, your neurotransmitters just aren't there to keep your brain in a normal state. So it contributes a huge piece of depression.
And if you have protective factors around you, then, family, community, but I think largely the military has studied that belonging component, but not necessarily they've studied a lot of things. I don't know that they've made the link or the connection to this feeling of like being on, when your shoulders are up, you're like tension.
Yeah. You're in fight flight. You're like, you're activated. You're ready to go.
And military family members, they also go through stress and they're also waiting and bracing themselves for their service member to retire, to get out of service. And they don't process their stuff until after their service member processes.
Yeah, because you're being the support person to help them through that time.
Yeah, so they're like watching like the timeline go by. Let's get them in their new job. Let's make sure they're settled because we've been told, that it's a very hard time for people transitioning to being better.
What do suicide rates in spouses look like? Is that something that's studied?
It is studied. We are 90-ish% female. And so as if you know anything, like suicide rates are higher among male populations. So when you look at those rates, it looks on the surface like lower overall, but when you break it down by gender, it's higher than it's not, something that I would say this is the news item of the day, but we also don't know what our veteran spouse numbers are. Those are not tracked.
That's not tracked. No. I was wondering if that would be something that was tracked.
But they only just recently started tracking military spouse suicides at all. And
interesting.
And that's because of the advocacy of military spouses who have alerted, folks to the fact that this lifestyle asks a lot of the entire family. And so in the book, I call out the fact that we need better research in certain areas because of the fact that, we want to make it easy for people to serve. And that means allowing them to have a fulfilling life with marriage and kids and all of the above. And how can we mitigate the issues that are asked, the things that are asked of the community.
Back in like 2018, I actually flew out to San Diego and I taught a couple workshops for military. I don't know if I've shared this. I taught a couple workshops to military spouses. I had a good friend who was a military spouse, and she was like, "You need to come teach your work." And she was saying that like they were at the time had just done some research that autoimmune diseases were so much higher in military spouses, and just so many like chronic disease states. And they were trying to figure out like, why is this? And my mom was like, well, because they're under so much stress. We know what stress does to the body, and I feel like I did that, and then we kind of planned this whole program, and then the world shut down, so we didn't really move forward with it. But it seemed to me like that's something that should be really researched and looked into, like what's happening on the physical side, like to their bodies, right?
Well, I think that as long as we are presenting outwardly that we're resilient, it probably won't happen, and that's why that's why I wrote this chapter of this book, is that we have to normalize saying that, we'll rise to the occasion, but they're like, what does that mean? Like, again, what is fast enough?
Almost like, it's also like, why don't we normalize it's okay to not be okay? It's okay to not be okay in the situation where your spouse is out and you don't know if he's alive or dead, right?
It is okay, but how does that, there is definitely a hesitancy to be that transparent in that community because of, like I was mentioning before, if everyone breaks down at the same time. It's kind of like your household. Like,
one kid melts down.
One parent. Like one is holding the other up when they're going through something hard. When you both go through something hard together at the same time, it is very challenging. So I would say it's a similar sort of idea in the military. So even if let's say a senior military spouse is, kind of advising a junior, they feel like they have to be this brave face for the junior spouse who's dealing with this for the first time.
Gotcha.
And so while, yes, they want to be vulnerable and have places for vulnerability, if you're in a community where you have to be on and you are the person someone's looking to for whatever, support, stability,
you can't always be breaking down.
Yeah, you're doing it for your kids as well. So like my kids missed their dad, right? So he would deploy And I could have been, broken down, but how would they get through if I was broken down? So there's a lot of reasons behind the brave faces.
Yeah.
I think that's why it's so essential for our civilian communities to come alongside our military communities, because they can be
Provide
that stability and like be that safe place, like to break down for a time.
Yeah.
But that takes a lot from a civilian community to welcome a new person that they might have to say goodbye to in a few years. And, we've been blessed in our family to have made friends with people who were like, we know you're leaving, but we're going to invest in you anyway.
Yeah.
And I would ask that people do, invest in this community, because it's, it's giving back. It's a way to thank us for our service in a real tangible way. And you get a friend out of it. And really great
and
people
a friend
too.
for life that is probably going to live interesting places and you can go visit, right? Hawaii, Japan, like all kinds of fun spots.
Exactly. I mean, we are hardworking. We are resilient. We are all of those things. And I think that, being a part of local communities is essential to us being able to have that safe space and break down if we need to. Not that we're just going to come into your home and break down, but, it's nice to have places to be yourself.
Well, I think it's so fantastic that you wrote this book. And I think in our community here in this local space, like, if you're listening and you're not connected to the read this book, right? And go make a military friend.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's definitely opportunities. I know that they have in the local community to participate with the military environment. It's a really amazing, welcoming community for the military. I do think, though, that it does have like that fun Annapolis version of the military. Yes. So, but there are people here who have been all over. And so like meet a veteran and learn a little bit more.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, talk about the book. Like,
okay.
I know it's out and this episode's out. It's out, but if you're local, can you talk about some of the events that are coming up?
Yes. So there will be a signing at Old Fox Books in downtown Annapolis. That's going to be on November 8th. I believe the start time is at 4, but I think I will be there prior to that. And they will be carrying the book as well ahead of time. And they have it online available for ordering.
To order, you can order it through Old Fox Books,
Old Fox Books. I can give you the link
we'll put it in the show
to
notes.
order that. But, supporting a local business and, they're supporting the local military story. I know they have a personal, connections to the military as well. And, it is a small Navy town. So, go Navy.
Yeah, go Navy.
But come and meet and we can chat. And, I'd love to hear what people have to say or if they've experienced resilience in a different way. Like I am a storyteller, so I just I would love to hear from people and what they think.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This has been fantastic. The book is great. I hope you definitely order it. You can click the link and order it. You can read it and come get it signed by Jen. Come explore all this. It's really interesting. And I think it is. I'm so happy that you wrote this. I feel like it's a message that everybody needs to hear, right? Whether you're military or not.
Well, I'm excited. Well, I'm excited for your book too.
Oh, yes. More about that later. Yeah. But thank you again for coming on. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see everyone next week.
Thank you for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to connect with me on social media to find more helpful tips and information. You can find me at Dr. Kinney on all of the platforms. And please be sure to subscribe and leave a rating and/or a review. This helps grow the show so more people have access to this knowledge that leads to empowered healing. Love and light, and see you next week.